Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for dialing in to this OECD Forum side session, where we'll be talking about the potential to capture value and reduce resource dependency through circular fashion systems in garment manufacturing countries. We appreciate that you dialed in today. We'll start in approximately a minute time after we've had the opportunity to welcome everyone to the session. Thank you for your patience. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for dialing into this OECD Forum side session on the potential to capture value and reduce resource dependency through circular fashion systems in garment manufacturing countries. On today's agenda, we'll start with opening remarks by Jonas Eder-Hansen, the Chief Development and Policy Officer at Global Fashion Agenda. We'll then have a short presentation sharing insights and policy recommendations from the Circular Fashion Partnership Programme, which took place in 2020 and 2021 in Bangladesh. Presentation will be by Runnel, the CEO and co-founder of Reverse Resources, and by myself. My name is Syrett, and I'm the Impact Programmes and Sustainability Director at Global Fashion Agenda. We'll then spend the majority of our time today with a panel discussion with 5 experts who have been valuable contributors to the Circular Fashion Partnership Project. We'll be hearing from Danique Lodewijks, the Senior Project Specialist Sustainability at BESTSELLER, and Runnel, again, the CEO and co-founder of Reverse Resources, Barrister Shehrin, Salam, Oishee, Director at BGMEA and the Envoy Group, Mustafain, Munir, the Director at CYCLO, and Masarrat, the Regional Stakeholder Engagement and Public Affairs Manager at the H&M Groups. We'll then conclude the session at around 12:15 CET. So we have approximately 75 minutes together. The session is being recorded and will be made available afterwards. And of course, we welcome you to share questions via the chat throughout. As you'll see, you are muted for the session, but we welcome chats. And also invite you to share any recommendations. So with no longer ado, we'll hand over to Jonas Eder-Hansen for opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Holly. And welcome everyone to this Global Fashion Agenda side session at the OECD Forum event. It's my great pleasure to be able to just give a few introductory remarks to kick us off, and maybe also just to briefly introduce the Global Fashion Agenda. GFA is an international and Copenhagen-based non-profit organization that guides leaders around the world to take action on increased sustainability performance, and of course also measuring then the industry progress on an annual basis. Our vision is a net positive fashion industry, and we're also on a mission to accelerate impact in the fashion industry by inspiring, educating, influencing, and mobilizing all stakeholders. And a key component in our strategy to reach this vision and achieve our mission is really around policy engagement and working much closer with policymakers, for instance, through impact programs, such as the Circular Fashion Partnership. Another key component in our new strategy is also alignment with the UN Global Goals. And because of the behavior of fashion and textile companies, it's really key to succeed and deliver on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, including, of course, on its human rights and environmental related objectives. And so many companies of today need to implement comprehensive mitigation processes for adverse human rights and environmental impacts in the value chain, integrating also sustainability into corporate governance and management systems. And so given the significant number of value chain partners and the overall complexity of the value chain in our industry, we know that it's tough, and companies may encounter, of course, numerous difficulties to identify and mitigate risks in their value chains linked to respect of human rights and or environmental impacts. However, we believe that the connection of the fashion and textile industry to millions of workers around the world through global value chains comes with a high responsibility to address these adverse impacts on the rights of these workers. And so today's event is important in many ways, not least because tomorrow the European Commission will also publish its long-awaited and somewhat delayed first proposal for due diligence legislation under the Sustainable Corporate Governance Initiative, as many of you have probably heard of, have been involved in, engaged in so far. And so this EU initiative follows a number of existing or upcoming national legislation from other EU member states on human rights and environmental due diligence. And some of you know, of course, already that in 2017, France published the Vigilante Act, and in 21, we had Germany publishing the Supply Chain Duty of Care Act, and also other EU member states, including Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Sweden, and others are planning similar acts in the near future. And also, as many of you are currently aware, the New York Fashion Act is being heatedly debated in the US with other states, with other US states potentially to follow suit, also addressing similar issues. So regulation, you might say, is really upon us as an industry. And many will argue that also that for too long, our industry has been really relying on, well, too heavily, maybe even on self-regulation and voluntary agreements. And it has brought us far, but maybe it hasn't brought us far enough. Many companies have taken serious actions, but too many companies have been free-riding under the radar. This is also why the Global Fashion Agenda has put a strategic focus on policy engagement. As an industry, we really need to collaborate much more with policymakers to achieve binding agreements that will dramatically increase sustainability performance of our industry. And so when GFA and BCG launched the first policy report back in 2017, one of the report findings was that 50% of the industry has not even started their sustainability journey. 5 years later, today, I'm sure this has changed somewhat, but we would most likely still see alarming figures if we were to do the same study today. So as an industry, we need to build these strong alliances with policymakers to dramatically increase sustainability performance for our whole industry. So in essence, GFA welcomes the efforts from policymakers to enhance these due diligence efforts in our industry. And we agree in tomorrow's proposals underlying message that identifying adverse human rights, environmental impacts in textile value chains will become easier if more companies exercise due diligence, and thus more data is available on human rights and environmental adverse impacts. And of course, which again will make it easier to double down on existing gaps. And so speaking of gaps, the main foundation for our discussion here today, the Circular Fashion Partnership in Bangladesh, has worked for almost 2 years to identify and mitigate existing gaps in post-production textile waste collection and recycling. Holly and Anne will shortly provide further key insights from the partnership. And from the onset of the partnership, we were already convinced that if we were to make true progress on the post-production textile waste collection and recycling, a certain attention to policy was necessary to unlock some of the identified barriers. And as mentioned in the beginning, GFA at Global Fashion Agenda, we truly believe that working closely with policymakers throughout projects and efforts to increase sustainability performance of our industry is crucial going forward. So we will continue to make this an integrated part of all our projects and partnership we engage in going forward. And so with that, thank you to BGMEA for an invaluable partnership in driving this program forward, and to P4G for the support to realize it as well, and of course to all the participating companies that have made such an amazing progress possible. And thank you to OECD for allowing us into the program. But over to Holly and Anne to provide us with an overview of the Circular Fashion Partnership Insights and Policy Brief Recommendations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonas. I won't introduce us again, as you'll be seeing us throughout, but I'm delighted to be presenting the Circular Fashion Partnership, giving a short introduction to what the project entailed and what we achieved collaborating together last year. And we'll be concluding with what key recommendations we have identified or what key barriers we've identified that we hope we can address during the panel. So the Circular Fashion Partnership is a cross-sectoral program with an overall goal to achieve a long-term and scalable transition to a circular fashion system. We intended to work towards that goal by supporting the development of the recycling industry in Bangladesh by capturing and directing post-production textile waste and integrating it into new fashion products. A second aspect of the initiative was to create a blueprint for upstream circularity that can be replicated across other manufacturing countries. We believe that circular fashion systems must be approached from a global supply chain approach, and that manufacturers are key in being part of what that new circular system can look like. So we can redistribute value in a fair way and really develop a new system that is not extractive, maintains the value of the materials that are in it, and as I said, distributes value. So we looked at twofold: how can we scale recycling capacity in Bangladesh, and how can we create a blueprint that can be replicated? I want to say thank you and take the opportunity to do so for the partners that are supporting us in continuing this project this year. So continuing with Kmart and Target Australia, Inditex, Primark, United Colours of Benetton, BESTSELLER, Peak Performance, the H&M Group, C&A, Oishee Yarns and CYCLO. A big thank you, as after our initial funding ended last year, they've been supporting us and continue this important work. We developed the Circular Fashion Partnership with an ecosystem approach. So we started by developing circular commercial collaborations, which are partnerships between brands, manufacturers and recyclers to, at first point, segregate post-industrial textile waste within manufacturing facilities, then digitize the waste streams and track them to suitable recycling solutions, and then explore as a second stage, how can those recycled materials be reincorporated into new products? And that's basically how we set out to develop the project. We then also started looking at the broader ecosystem and how we can create a conducive environment to enable these circular systems. We started exploring what political barriers could be and how we can make a business case for investment to really increase domestic recycling capacity. So first part, focusing on the business model. What can collaborations look like throughout the value cycle, and how can we reframe business models to be more circular? What goes around comes around. So how can we ensure that throughout those different chains of waste and reincorporating it, value is expressed throughout? And then how can we support those infrastructures by supportive policy and investment, and which we'll be talking more about today. We were delighted to welcome many different partners to the project. The last year, there were over 20 global fashion brands, 17 recyclers, and at 1.80 manufacturers in Bangladesh, segregating waste and tracking it to recycling. And we really saw a benefit of collaborating with a large group of stakeholders throughout the industry to create a unified voice, to create awareness, but also to see how we can address issues that can't be addressed independently, such as topics as the ownership of waste and how we can, for instance, create more awareness through a shared effort. I'd like to hand over now to Anne Runnel, again, CEO and co-founder of Reverse Resources, who was a key partner in the initiative and conducted the waste segregation and data analysis to share our initial results.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, everybody. Great to be here. So just a word about Reverse Resources to start with. Reverse Resources is a software as a service platform. And through this CYCLO Fashion partnership, we are happy that we've got such an amazing opportunity to get that recycling system transparently digitized in Bangladesh and show what we can actually do with digitalization. So as part of that partnership over the last year, if you go to the next slide, please, we helped to quantify how much of that waste was captured from garment factories, how much was that of that was distributed to different recycling partners, it was the numbers got quite big by the end of the year. It was 1,500 tons of waste registered on the platform. This is actively like daily basis data registration. This is live data, not just a survey, which is important to be mentioned here. It is very clear that majority of the waste registered on the platform and traced is 100% cotton or very cotton rich, because this is what the recyclers are really looking for. And yeah, if we go further to the next slide, you can see that there was a really good traction on the platform. We got a lot of positive engagement from many stakeholders, which seemed quite impossible task a year before. So it was really a great opportunity to make waste visible and traceable. As part of the project, we also quantified what would be the total opportunity for Bangladesh. How much waste there is in general from production, and what are the material flows through the country right now. And we came to a conclusion that 250,000 tons of waste from the ready-made garment factories is cotton, which could be recirculated back into the industry, and Bangladesh could save 15%, $500 million of dollars from just using its own waste, cotton waste, as a raw material for the industry again. So it was the first time we could quantify that on a country level, and show that the opportunity is really huge for circular economy. We also were able through that project to show that there is a very strong business case here. So it's not just nice to dream, but it is a very practical business case to work towards.
Thank you so much, Anne. And so besides the large group of participants in the project and these really exciting figures, and I know the Reverse Resources team have really been doing a lot of data analysis and building upon this captured data over the past months and years as well. But besides all the positive, we also identified a few barriers that really need to be addressed to further scale the work that we've been doing together, not only in Bangladesh, but at a global level as well. So I want to share a few more opportunities and barriers. To start with, what the opportunity could look like at a more global level. We partnered with the team at McKinsey & Co. to really dive deep into the work that the Reverse Resources team have been doing, but all of the participating brands, manufacturers and recyclers as well in the Circular Fashion Partnership, and to identify what key lessons are from the project for building pre-competitive collaboration to really scale upstream circular fashion systems. And what you can see here on the screen is an estimation of what the opportunity could be to scale post-industrial recycling with an indication of revenue for recyclers. So as you can see, at 1.2 billion US annually, Bangladesh is currently leading the pack with opportunity as identified by McKinsey for recycling technologies, partially because of the large quantities of high calorific waste streams, such as 100% cotton, which we'll be talking more about, but also that in other key production countries, such as Vietnam, Turkey, India, Malaysia, and Indonesia, there's a huge potential, a huge business model for textile to textile recyclers. So the opportunities are there, but what barriers have we identified? Within the Circular Fashion Partnership and its first year in Bangladesh, one of the main barriers we identified was the need to formalize the informal waste handling sector, which is currently informal, and to really engage in the circular systems we were developing and testing. Currently, waste handling happens very much in an informal sphere and is very efficient within that. But to create a closed loop, to digitize, to Anne's point, and to really capture the value, there needs to be a more formal approach. We also need to establish a common understanding of waste ownership. So as brands set their more and more targets on recycled materials, the demands to recyclers increase and recyclers' need for feedstock increase. So who owns waste? Is it garment manufacturers creating the waste and the final products? Is it brands commissioning the work? Or is there a different players who should be considered here? And what are the playing rules, I guess? The need to adopt traceability tools to present waste value and flows. We didn't know what opportunities there were immediately without the work conducted by the manufacturers in the project and the reverse resources team. So how can we further identify and remove the opacity around this topic? And then there are a few other more Bangladesh specific topics, such as how we can address limits on waste generation and taxation in the country. How can we increase awareness? And of course, this isn't only in Bangladesh, but in other manufacturing countries, but also at European and supranational level as well, for the potential of really capturing post-industrial waste. And we'll be talking more later about how we can balance out the conversation on post-use garments and post-industrial waste capturing. And then how can we harness potential of export processing zones where, for instance, right now, there's a very well organized waste collection. How can we really engage that and those parties and capture the potential there? And then further facilitate cross-sectoral collaboration in Bangladesh and beyond. We believe that one of the main success criteria for the initial phase of this project was really bringing together different players, even for instance, recyclers and brands, to talk about material characteristics and explore how recycled materials can be included in collections, even if they might not meet a criteria that a brand currently has. What is the midway there? And that's just an example of topics that we've been discussing within the project and hope to continue doing so. So hopefully this has provided a bit of insight into the Circular Fashion Partnership project. I would now like to introduce our panelists and invite them all to turn their cameras on and to unmute. And we're absolutely delighted to be welcomed today by, I guess, a cross-sectoral panel as well. So we have Danique Lodewijks, who is a Senior Project Specialist at Sustainability at BESTSELLER. Welcome, Danique. Barrister Shehrin Salam Oishee. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Apologies if I don't.
Yeah, that's Shehrin. Yeah, thank you.
Director at BGMEA and the Envoy Group. Anne, who you met. Mustafain Munir, Director at CYCLO. And Masarrat, who's a Regional Stakeholder Engagement Lead and Public Affairs Manager at the H&M Group. Welcome all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all.
So I'd like to start, this is our opportunity, or at least we thank OECD for the opportunity of being part of their side events, to really communicate what we're looking for and what we learned from this project and what we need from policymakers, both at EU and international level, but also regionally as well. What I want to start is about the global nature of the value chain. And I want to ask, what consequences can you see for manufacturing products in the, what consequences can you see for manufacturing products for the EU market, but which are being manufactured in other countries with upcoming legislation? And do you have any consequences that you can highlight at this stage? And then maybe start with the question for Danique.
Yeah, of course, I think it's we need, with the new legislations coming up, we need to know where our products are being produced. Of course, that's what we know, but we also need to find solutions on what to do with the waste that we generate with our productions. And of course, with the big majority of our collections being produced in Bangladesh, we learned a lot from the CFP project, and also collaborating there together with local recyclers made it possible for us to kind of close the loop and reuse our waste in new garments. And I think that is just something that we really need to build on, and not only for the cotton waste, but also for the other blends that we have in our collections. And yes, we are very much looking forward to continue to work there and to really take that to the next level.
Thank you. And perhaps Masarrat, at H&M Group, do you see any consequences for producing externally and importing to Europe with the upcoming legislations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the legislations that we're seeing emerge in the EU are really important, not just to us as a European brand, but actually very interestingly to all brands who operate in the EU and who sell in the EU. And we really see this as a positive in terms of leveling the playing field and setting very clear expectations around where things are moving in the EU, but also allocating resources to that. We know that it's not just about setting regulations, it's also about making things possible. And we know that alongside the due diligence legislation that's being considered in the EU is also making available large resources and supporting a range of different programs and initiatives to drive positive change. So there will definitely be consequences to us as well as other brands in terms of the changes that are happening, but we feel quite comfortable about the direction that things are moving on. As a company, we do have a very high level of both transparency as well as traceability in terms of our supply chain and going quite far down. And we know that kind of it will be a gradual process that will happen over time. We're really grateful that we have a good dialogue with the EU to kind of position things. If change happens too quickly or too dramatically, I think there's lots of risks as well that the EU is taking into consideration very carefully. So overall, we see this as a positive move. And look forward to staying engaged as it evolves and matures.
Super, thank you. And yeah, I know you and I, one of our favorite topics to talk about is really the opportunity for post-industrial. And sometimes we feel the narrative can be quite focused on really post-use recycling. Can you talk a little bit more, and I know you already shared some information with us, a little bit more about why you believe post-industrial should be a leading topic when we're talking about circularity, maybe more upstream or within manufacturing countries?
Mm-hmm. So if our mission is to help fashion industry close its loop and take textile waste as a raw material, then we need to consider what are the different technologies out there that actually can do that. And there is a boom of technologies entering the market. But at the moment, those who are already in the market and who are scaling up right now, the majority of them can only use 100% cotton so that it can be turned back into high quality materials. They are expanding from 100% cotton to 90% cotton now, and there like more blends are coming in. But post-consumer waste cannot be sorted yet so accurately by composition on large scale. And given that, there is another technological gap there. Also, textile recycling, it needs to know the background story of the material so that we can know what chemicals are going into our garments. We need to know what is where that material actually came from, and recyclers need to know the exact composition. So industrial waste is a low-hanging fruit to help that recycling industry to emerge first, and then help that to scale further to other blended materials. And what we're actually looking at is reorganizing these material waste flows on a global level, because when textile to textile recycling in Europe is consuming a lot of industrial waste from Asia now, and Asia is importing post-consumer waste, but can't consume all of it. We need to be able to localize recycling, and we need to know which materials are matching with which technologies. So that whole launch of recycling industry, or circulation of like in the circulation of fiber, it really requires market insight and statistics and data that is completely missing, because international statistics on textile materials usually talks about the dollar value of garments. But there isn't enough statistics to understand how much is cotton elastin blend, and all these questions that are crucial for those large recycling plants that are interested to set up their production. So that is, for us, has been kind of the first challenge, to do that waste mapping and start generating live accurate statistics instead of single surveys where the data gets outdated really fast.
I see Masarrat avidly nodding. I'd like to give you the opportunity to weigh in, and then I'd be keen to hear from Mustafain from CYCLO as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to add one point as Anne was speaking. I think, you know, we have to be pragmatic about the opportunities that we have in each of the countries, right? And in Bangladesh, most retailers, most brands don't have retail operations. There's restrictions on foreign retail here. So what is available in abundance is lots of pre-consumer cotton waste. And it's such a unique situation because so much of it is cotton, and so much of it, you know, can be turned into something that is super valuable. So I totally understand why the post-consumer discussion is important and relevant in many different countries. It's also, as Anne articulated really well, much more complicated. And we as a company, for example, are thinking about how we design products so that they can be taken apart and so that they can be recycled really more easily than they can be now. So at present for Bangladesh, the focus really does need to be on the pre-consumer, post-production waste that is here in abundance, and it's such a lost opportunity that 90% of it is getting shipped to India and then recycled, and then we're buying it back. So it's just such an opportunity, and it's great to have partners like CYCLO in Bangladesh who are leading the way and kind of taking those risks and showing that it can be done in a profitable and scalable way.
Thank you for the shout out there. Yeah, so with regards to the question, yeah, so I mean, we have been doing this actually for Simcoe Spinning, which is our factory. We've been doing it for over 11 years now. And, you know, at the start, it was considered kind of like a junk in, junk out type of proposition. But, you know, we had the foresight to kind of hold on, and when things were going bad, and say like, no, this is going to be, you know, the process of this current era. And obviously what we are doing using mechanical recycling, we already maxed out our build capacity. And right now the problem actually is getting new machines in and expanding quick enough to match the demand. in terms of pure scaling point of view, but we do have plans of, the next factory we're building, which should be ready in about 1.5 years, is going to be twice the size of our existing one. And we are very excited to do that. But it's a very linear thing for us at this point, because it's just so obvious that we have to do it, and we are doing it. But that presents the opportunity then for us to look at the other waste streams here on what are the better recycling technologies or the improved recycling technologies that can handle blends, and especially what's happening with the cotton elastane, which is a nightmare for all recyclers. So we kind of use the opportunity of the partnership to kind of also evaluate what technologies are coming up and what can actually be adapted to Bangladesh, because there's a huge, like Masarrat and Danique was saying, there's a tremendous opportunity outside just 100% cotton. And if once we can tap into that, and since the dialogue is already going between like the brands and recyclers and spinners like us, who we do recycling and spinning, so we know our and learning still continuously what the quality constraints are and for which products recycled cotton is best adapted to. So with that in mind, I guess further down the line, in a few years, once we can adapt, let's say, a chemical recycling technology in Bangladesh, we would have a pretty strong base of which products and the pricing models and the sustainability requirements required for each. I guess for a lot of people, it's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I've been doing it for, like I said, for 10 years. So it's an exciting time for us. We have no shortage of opportunities here, and we're constantly looking for new challenges to hopefully address some of the other waste streams.
And you mentioned linear, that some processes are still quite linear for you. Could you explain what you meant with that?
Oh, the scaling process is linear for us. It's like our working model is trying to be more circular in the sense that we are, closing the loop, and we're incorporating different brands. We're using the brand's bone waste in their stream. But my scaling model, is pretty linear. Like, I don't have to do much like outside of the box thinking. Like, I know exactly what machines I need. I'm working with the suppliers to help customize that a little bit more for recycling. Since we have had the experience of recycling and spinning also for 10 years. So like, I know what capacity I can put in this space that I have, and at what output I'll be putting. So in that case, I meant academically linear, like in terms of planning. But yeah, in terms of the volume, it's going to be more exponential, I guess.
That's what we'd hope, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We think almost you'd be in like this amazing situation. You see this global brand demand for the products that you're developing. You're increasingly getting access to feedstock that's traced through reverse resources. What do you need support with? If you have, we're calling out to policymakers today, are there any barriers and roadblocks that you're facing that you and perhaps other recyclers might need to see addressed?
Yeah, so that's a question for me also.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I cannot point to a specific policy necessarily. I can kind of talk from an economic standpoint because, again, because of the experience here. Now, when it comes to the physical buying of the waste, is something like, between reverse resources, and we do like on a regular basis, access to cheaper capital. So for example, right now, I'm buying from reverse resources, but I'm still buying the majority from the market. And a lot of that is still a cash transaction. Now, some people like to keep it a cash transaction because that way it's, it can be untaxed, unregulated, goes straight to the pockets. But for actually a business that's trying to be on the up and up, when I'm doing a cash transaction, then I have to use like working capital, which is on a higher interest base than, let's say, a term loan or a time loan is, where I'll be using an LC, for example, or official cash, So then this, like, honestly speaking, is like how kind of like it's going to start pushing it in the right directions to make sure that the waste goes to the right people at the right time, not just the one with the most physical cash in their backpack, because that's literally how I buy a lot of waste, is my guys go to the market with a backpack full of cash and do it. But at the same time, I'm paying 9% interest on that cash. So that's one thing. The other thing, obviously, with the so how it affects with the, I guess, more on a customs border policy, is that, yeah, a lot is being exported to India, to Turkey, and to Europe, China. I cannot say with certainty that I'm pro banning it necessarily. I'm not. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's still, yeah, logistically, it sounds bad that it's going back and forth to be used. But there are other recyclers coming up in Bangladesh this year, especially. There's going to be quite a few. And the competition and demand for that waste is only going to get more. I mean, it's increasing, obviously, and the price has, it's been shown that in the price level. So, I mean, recommendations basically on a more somewhat specific level with regards to this, because, I mean, I guess we're going to talk about the ownership of the waste afterwards, which is something I do want to get into. But some type of benefit or subsidies for factories who are using their waste responsibly through a trace chain, some type of legal protection for recyclers, or literal security protection for recyclers who are buying from factories directly, so that we don't have fear of retaliation from nefarious characters. Basic level stuff, because once we start talking about a more global policy, I still, in my mind, have not thought through all the unintended consequences on that level. But again, from like the EU standpoint, like officially recognizing recycled apart from in like I mean, I know it's duty free anyway from Bangladesh, all exports or all garment exports, but maybe a subsidy or something like that for the more recycled percentage that you have in. Obviously, it would be nice for me, but again, we have to combat the greenwashing and the paper trail certification thing to make sure that doesn't get messed up, so that people take advantage unnecessarily. Yeah.
I think that's a really clear overview of what you're looking for and how we'll be able to further increase capacity. I'd really like to bring in Barrister Shehrin from BGMEA, because we're talking about really scaling the domestic market in Bangladesh. We've been working with BGMEA for a few years now already, and also to build upon Mustafain's point, this access to capital and creating an environment for investment. Do you have any ideas on which organizations we should be further engaging in Bangladesh, and how we can create a strong or stronger partnership to really create this conducive environment that we're looking towards?
Thank you, Holly. Before I actually resort to your answering your question, I would like to trail to what Mr. Munir was saying. So when we're talking about a very different industry being set, which would be the recycling industry, as we are talking about in this whole discussion, I would like to date back a few years. Back in 2009, I'm personally talking about my group. So Envoy Group had set up the first rope dyeing textile, which was given the LEED certification by USGBC as the first platinum certified mill in the world. So basically, Bangladesh is one of those countries which are ready to take a lead and be one of those extraordinary ones in displaying not just adaptive changes, but then they are ready to take and all different ideas and incorporate in our systems. So if you could date back from 2013 in the Rana Plaza incident, Bangladesh had gone through a very a collective and designed system of remediation in accord with Accord and Alliance. Besides that, we had the national platform with NAP, which was the National Action Plan. And then it was a collective motion together. And we had the safety audits on fire, electrical, structural, integrity, and everything all sorted to ensure that the whole industry is evolving in a way which is ready for the future changes to be adapted in a faster track. After all this has taken on the road, the sustainability point that we always talk about has been a constant concern and has been welcomed by this industry for many years in the past. And I think the fact that Bangladesh has approximately 157 LEED certified green factories in this country, we house it over here, with 47 being platinum certified, 96 in gold, 10 in silver, and 4 certified as well. So I think this industry is ready to go on the next level to welcome this new sector, which is not just the demand of time, but the industry as well is thinking that we ought to go on and embark on this new journey. But then, as Mr. Munir was referring to some legislative changes and some policy issues, as I seem to be standing on both the boats as a businesswoman and one from the legal background too. So I would like to shed some light with regards to this in case of legislative issues as well. So when we are actually setting up a new industry, Bangladesh at present is in the crossroads of some exemplary developmental states, actually. So we have had our government set up 100 economic zones, of which we were actually, BGMEA in a collective motion along with the government and other institutions had requested a fast track realization of a few of those economic zones. So we could actually reallocate some industries in a better location as well as develop some new ones. One of the major concerns at this point is which industry do we think we would want to prioritize and develop. So one of our very first nomination was the recycling industry, which is being worked on at a very fast track basis. The second thing is our visionary Prime Minister, who's leading our country at the moment, Sheikh Hasina. She's been very open to FDIs, the foreign direct investment. So this industry to be, it's kind of a novel industry, I would say, because Bangladesh has not yet opened its arms to it, or we haven't had a previous generation, like my father has been in the RMG, so I'm following in his footsteps, but none has been in this recycling industry. So it's something novel for all of us. So we don't have a precedent to follow. So something as new as this, we would be depending ourselves on some investment. And our country and our government is very welcome to that. For that, we also have BIDA, which is the Bangladesh Investment Management Board. With having a fast track system to manage the investments as well as setting up new with some very incentivized ways of getting this whole system started, I believe the only thing where we are stucking by are two things. One is policy. Another one is legislative. So policy, basically, because our country has never yet had a formalized circular economy policy before. As Mr. Munir has mentioned about the linear method, we can actually, if I've heard him right, we can actually move from the older version to the new only if we have a mesh and a dialogue between all the different institutions working over here, starting from the government, the legislative bodies who shall actually enable and help us to get all of these together and a fast track realization of the whole system. The policy making, for which which is of the utmost importance at the moment. And lastly would be the incentives, or of course, any industry would require investments over here. So at this time, we would like to knock a few doors. One of that would be definitely some of our very prospective buyers and the foreign investments that come and flow into our country. The reason being, our people in Bangladesh yet have a very old and setback idea about recycling. They believe that producing is all that matters, but what is produced, the leftovers to be used, is not yet of the most important concern in the whole supply chain. So the first thing we need to sit and do is educate our people. Not the general public, of course, but the manufacturers. We need to gather the enthusiastic manufacturers, preferably some of those green factories, to understand that recycling is the new catch. It is the new cake. It's not like the fish in the bone. Sorry, the bone in the fish, sorry. But it's like the new cake, which is going to bring back more into our country. We always keep saying in all platforms that our competitive labor, our manpower is our wealth. We need to use it, and setting up a new industry as such would be the best way of getting our manpower, our trained and probably to be trained manpower back into the system, and getting more better system of arranging the livelihoods of these people. So at this very point, all we think is there are a number of parties we need to get going. But the first one is a collective initiative taken by our government, the enthusiastic manufacturers, or the ones who are ready to actually take up the whole issue at the moment and start or take the first steps, baby steps in the industry, and probably the legislative and policymakers. So once we all are on the same dialogue, I think we can lend our hand to our collective foreign investors or buyers, who shall also, I believe they're more than keen to actually come and take a part in this, so that this industry grows and there is a better opportunity for others to come and involve themselves in it.
Thank you so much, Shehrin. That was crystal clear as well. I'd actually like to talk a little bit about how we can support you in that and how we can collaborate on it. And one of the things that I'd be keen to touch upon is how we can develop a digital infrastructure in parallel to testing out these different systems, and how that can become a tool. Can I bring you in and hear a little bit more about what the role is of digitization? You already touched on it, but how it can really help in scaling this more, and how it can become a tool for the public sector and the government, and how we can really use it, also to Shehrin's point.
Thank you, Holly. The first thing about the whole system of recycling being established sector in this country, we probably would have to educate the government bodies a little bit more. Because what happens is our recycling system, even at this moment with such high-tech devices up in this country, and with so much being exported and known and everything, but we are still a step back from the whole world, the way they are actually dealing with these things. So firstly, I believe two things. Any manufacturer who is working in this sector must need to concentrate on two things. Number one is to produce the least amount of waste possible. So it is a very personal choice of every manufacturer to be self-conscious about the amount of waste they're producing. And number two is how we can actually get those pre-consumer waste to be made into something very useful. As Ms. Kader was saying a bit ago, that we cannot imagine how the pre-consumer waste can be made into something so much valuable, but we are literally throwing it away without even understanding the value of it. So these things have to be a self-realization, and probably a little bit of professing about on those issues would be something we really need to take forward at this point on both the government and the private levels, because it's an initiative that needs to be collaborated together. Yeah. Then again, if we come on the part of digitization, so once we have the government on board with us, I believe as you've heard about how Bangladesh is handling the digital wage system. It is something we have actually started on during COVID especially, and it has been highly praised by all, because, you know, Bangladesh taking such a step at a very short time as a call of an emergency, I think it was praised by a lot. So I believe that now the salary systems or something of that ways, it starts from a government website and a private website. They merge together. And all information fed by one is viewed by the other until unless it's something confidential and fixed only for that particular person to see. So what we need to do is, BGMEA has this whole board or all this database of its members. All members are all manufacturers. And I perceive that all of these manufacturers actually have a system of, they produce waste. Everyone produces pre-consumer waste. But the problem is we never get to quantify which factory produces how much, or which product produces how much pre-consumer waste, because we do not have a database of such. So from the very outset, we probably need to come on the same page and get a proper database where there is the government pilot over there, as well as the individual companies or the members who are actually going to input the amount of pre-consumer waste that they are producing. So then there's a government database as to how much nationally the whole pre-consumer waste is being produced. Then when the whole, yes, sorry.
Sorry to intersect. Perfectly setting up to hit from.
Yes, I might be in too much details because then, you know, I had been a professor sometimes, so I was thinking that I would break every little bits for everyone. So if that is too much, please do stop me.
No,
whatever you think.
You're perfectly setting us up to hear a little bit more about the reverse resources platform and what that could potentially mean for the public sector.
So I'm actually running for what Mr. Runnel was supposed to say. I'm sorry. But then again, just doing a little bit of your stuff over here. But anyways, just going on the very main point, at this very time, you see that we are actually producing, if I'm not wrong, there are about $100 and something billion pre-consumer waste that we are actually producing every year, of which only 5% are recycled. Recycle is not actually the word is sorting and sending it back for recycle. So a part 95% is actually not done anything in our part. We are sending it back to countries like India or Turkey, and they're doing it, and we're buying it at a higher price back to our thing. So it's like I am buying my own products in a much refined way. So I think digitalization in this place would mean that the private entrepreneurs who will be producing the waste will have a database to upload it in there. And probably on this side, there would be someone who's going to understand the national statistics on that. But I believe that this country is going in a fast track already before we actually graduate on the, after the LDC. So I think that an opportunity for a new industry setting up is wonderful at this moment. It is a novel industry, of course. We would need a lot of mid-level training done on our officials, our managers, and that's it. Yeah. And yes, Ms. Runnel has a question, I think.
Thank you so much, Shehrin. Go ahead,
Rather a comment, because I'm so happy that you're describing quite exactly what Reverse Resources Platform is doing. Our goal really is to quantify this for the public sector, for the government, also for the industry, and kind of engage everybody into one digital system. So this is actually exactly what was the what we started with the Circular Fashion Partnership project, that we started to quantify the materials from production. But to reply, Holly, to your question, how I see digitalization take this role in policy development, I think there are quite some different layers that I would mention here. One is that very often, I come from Estonia, which is a highly digitalized country, especially on the government and public sector level. And what I have seen in fashion industry, very commonly, we think about physical process first, and then digitalization or transparency comes second, as something that we need to kind of prove later. But actually, digitalization can be seen as the vehicle to start with the movement and actually build efficiency into these processes from day one, and that's one thing that is really important when we build circular economy. From what we've done in this project as well, we can see that when we're taking with digital tools, we can take a completely different disruptive approach where. And I think this is important for any country globally when building a more efficient textile circulation system, is to identify the supply and connect that with a recycling or the use case first, before we actually suggest what is the best supply chain to apply. Because normally what happens with waste is that it gets collected, somebody sells it forward to next party to do sorting of it, then it's sold next party to aggregate bigger volumes, then it's sold to the fourth party who has an export license, fifth party has an import license, and that adds cost to waste on every step of the way. So in principle, just connecting supply and demand first and identifying the one middleman who can actually, in the particular case, solve the collection, sorting, cleaning, delivery problems at once is really important. And I want to talk about the importance of a handler a bit later in another context, but jumping over to going back to the digitization, just the fact that the data and the insight that the market needs can be driven by the public sector to ask questions. How much circularity do we have today? How much circularity can we achieve in a year? How much did we actually achieve? And this is where that kind of the dialogue between the public sector and private sector can start, and the digitalization tools, data can support both sides to learn what's actually happening and build smart policy from there.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I see again Danique and Masarrat nodding to Anne's points about the capturing waste and creating really more insight into what your waste flows are. Danique, would you like to chime in on your contribution and involvement in the project and why this is important to you? And then what I'd really like to touch upon, I think that's we've all mentioned in some form already today, is really the ownership of waste and how are we going to address that? And then I see also, oh, there's so much to talk about, but also 100% cotton I see in the chat as well. Is only 100% cotton recyclable? What are we going to look at the bigger picture? Sorry, that's a lot to drop on your plate.
I'll give it a try. No, I mean, with a lack of like virgin resources, and with also the prices of raw materials going up and up and up and up, and with so many new innovators coming into the field of recycling, I think the value of waste will only go up, right? So there's a hunt for high valuable waste, and we all know that white cotton waste is of course most useful, but we also know that during our design process, we are not only designing white t-shirts. Of course, we have a part to do there as a brand to design maybe more into mono materials and do different kind of things there. But in the end, it's still fashion and things will change and we work in different cycles. And it's not always a constant flow of certain blends or mixtures. So I think there is a huge job for us to do there in terms of product development, because there is a lot of amazing innovators out there that I'm sure are able to go to the next level, as Mustafain was saying as well. So I think there's just a big need for collaboration there, and to also see, okay, what is it that we actually have available? How can we make that available? And in regards to that, we can also come back to the ownership of waste, because we, as a brand, I don't think we always own the waste, since we are buying a ready-made garment and we're not like buying yarn or fabric here. So the waste then belongs to the manufacturer, you can say, and they of course have that huge informal system that is happening in Bangladesh, which I think is something that we would really need help on as well from the different policymakers out there, because so many manufacturers are so used to sell their waste through that informal system, and I think we really need to find a way to work together with that informal system to like to visualize that waste, but also to make that more valuable. Because of course it makes sense that a manufacturer is already segregating by color and quality, so that does not need to happen again, you know. So I think there's a lot of workflows that need to be looked into, and also making it more attractive for those manufacturers to segregate in that way. And then of course we also know that manufacturers are working for several brands. They're not just only working for Bestseller. So there, I think we really need to take a collaborative approach together with all brands out there and really make this happen, because we know it's there and we know it's there to take. So yeah, I think it's a good journey we have ahead.
just wanted to add a couple of points to what has been said already by Danique. I think, the points that Shehrin was making around Bangladesh is actually a country in which we have a super dynamic private sector that responds and reacts and kind of takes forward progress. And it's a really unique context compared to many other manufacturing countries, as we know, because it is locally owned businesses who are invested in being here as a country. And so I think we're kind of in this middle point right now with recycling. Many brands have now made big commitments and set ambitious goals around recycling and circularity. We, for example, at H&M Group have said by 2025, 30% of our materials will be recycled. And by 2040, the goal is to be 100% either recycled or sustainably sourced. And many other brands have made similar commitments. And the market will get that here. I'm very confident in the industry's ability and willingness and proactiveness in responding to that market signal. But I think just to bring it back to the policy environment, if you see how the garment sector in Bangladesh began and the role of the policy environment when it began, it was very much the industry and kind of the investors that made the investments. But the government did two things. One was the bonded warehouses, and the second was the back-to-back letters of credit. These two are considered in lots of kind of analysis and research to have been two really big policy enablers that enabled investors to come in and created that kind of environment in which investments just flowed in, and the entrepreneurship and the training and all this other, these all other bits happened. So I think with regards to circularity, we have to really, we and the government, and it's mainly the government actually, have to think about what is it that they can do to make this easy and to make this happen quickly, because this will give Bangladesh a competitive edge. By having a recycling sector here that's present, we don't want GHG emissions coming back and forth. We're all counting these GHG emissions. So we have to think about how to do this the most efficient way possible. So I think the key thing is, what are those 2 or 3 policy changes that will enable investors to do what they do best? And whether that's FDI or whether that's local investors or whether it's a combination, that kind of the market will take forward, that there will be a natural process of evolution there. But I think we need to be really strategic as stakeholders and each think about, so what is our role? We as a brand, for example, our role is to send a signal to the market that this is something that's really important to us. And this is something that we think people will need to invest in. And we're actually having conversations with people who are recyclers in other countries who work with us to say, come to Bangladesh, there's tremendous opportunity here. And there's nothing more that we would like than to be able to connect them with, our suppliers here to make that technology transfer happen more quickly. So it's a question of how quickly can Bangladesh get in that game. Of course, we have companies like CYCLO who are so ahead of the curve. But 1 or 2 or 5 companies is not enough for the scale that we have in Bangladesh. We need that to be dozens and then hundreds. And so how do we get that to happen really quickly? And access to finance is definitely a piece of that. Incentives are a piece of that. Having policies that really enable private sector to do what they do best is probably another piece of that as well. Sorry, I didn't answer your question exactly, Holly, but I felt it necessary to make that point about the private sector here.
Yeah, can I chime in as a private sector guy here? Because I feel like am I the only one? Yeah. I would agree with Masarrat on this point, and I would respectfully disagree with the Barrister on this point, because right now the market is moving much faster than the government or the policy is. I mean, when it comes in the banking industry as well. So like when it comes to investment, like I have no problem getting low interest loans. I have no problem getting interest from outside investors, but I don't want outside investors right now. When it comes to I have so many notes over here. The zones like the export processing zones. Like with all due respect, like I had a factory and export site processing zone, and it was an absolute nightmare. You couldn't pay me to put a factory and export site processing zone right now. So this is just what the experience I had. So there's some, and what you said about the bond license was one of the biggest things, because it's not allowing me to scale. Like, so I've doubled the capacity in the last 2 years, but I'm not allowed to bring in twice as much of recycled polyester as I need under the bond license, or sustainable viscose, or when we get into the renew cells and into the other types of man-made recycled fibers that are going to be coming out. The bureaucracy is killing a lot of time in all this. So I just have to bring in from the private sector side, like, we don't want government involved in anything. As personally for me, let's just say, okay. Sorry, that's it. That's my point. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mustafain. So we have just a few minutes left. So what I'd like to do is just to share with the audience where they can learn more about this project. And of course, we'll be publishing our policy recommendations with an overview of the barriers that we've identified, but also the recommendations that we give at both the regional and national level, as a EU and supranational level as well. I want to also touch upon the informal sector, and I see, and thank you for the questions that have come in. This has been one of the big barriers that we've faced within the project, and something that we are seeking support with on how to further address. As I go to our slides so the audience can see more, I'd like to open the floor and ask if any of the panelists would like to share their experience with engaging with the informal sector and what recommendations we have for policymakers on how we can further address. Go ahead, Anne.
I can maybe take that. As Reverse Resources has been very actively involved in building the supply chains, making sure that the waste actually gets delivered from factories to recycling, and then trying to understand what are the barriers right now, and then also what is like, what are the new rules of the game that need to be introduced so that we will lower the cost of sourcing and sourcing for recyclers. Then we obviously have come across with this topic, and I've been really happy to get a lot of insight from BGMEA on how to kind of go about this on a daily basis. So there is a very clear principle that we are not, everything is voluntary basis, basically. Factories are sharing as much waste with us as they like to or can at that point. So it's not kind of, we aren't trying to make sure that we capture all the waste right away. But I also wanted to kind of, in that discussion, highlight, as I mentioned, the importance of the waste trading sector, which is actually what the informal business is all about. Right now, there is a lot of informalities in a lot of, like, it's not regulated part of the market, but it could be, and that the trading sector really carries an important role, because often when the first recycling projects are set up, there is small first collections, first deliveries. It seems that it's easy for the factory to send their waste straight to the recycler and override that trading sector. But actually traders, as I mentioned, they carry a lot of services. Because every factory has a variety of many different materials that end up actually and are supposed to end up in many different recycling plants. So organizing these material flows, aggregating bigger volumes, making sure that if there is a branded waste, that it actually is delivered to a recycling partner that this brand may want to work with. And all the relationships around that, are the factories okay to do that? As a software as a service platform, we can create tools and working processes, but we need handlers to work with. And we are kind of inviting that informal sector to be formalized so that this work actually can be done. And there is a huge opportunity for that trading sector to shift over to a new business case of offering a service to fashion industry with a very proper business case. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Anne. I'm so sorry, but I have to wrap us up. A few of the points shared, I think, to what I heard very clearly also from Masarrat is that we need to do pragmatically an analysis on what policy reform we need and specify our request to policymakers, support digitalization, of course, to Anne's point, and perhaps seek funding for a publicly facing waste trace platform that I believe Barrister Shehrin pointed out could be a very useful tool at a national level as well. Access to cheaper capital, support in presenting the business case to really incentivize manufacturers to trace their segregated waste, and also security from retaliation. So really, how can we include the informal sector with this process? Just a few points that are shared. Thank you to our amazing group of panelists. We could have spent a lot more time, I believe, together on this topic. You can learn more about this project and how you can participate on circularfashionpartnership.com. But a big thank you to you all, and a big thank you again to OECD for enabling us to host this side session today. So we will be sharing the recording for those interested and those registered afterwards. And I wish you all a great rest of the OECD Forum, and looking forward to moving this work forward together as well. So thank you all. Take care.
Thank you, Holly. Thanks, everyone.